So we got a new sponsor, Ballogy. Appreciate the people at Ballogy for showing some love in us. That was kind of a unexpected news bit for us to in our brief hiatus that we got a new sponsor. So let me tell you a little bit about our friends at Ballogy. Ballogy is built for coaches like you. It gives real data on player development, saves you time, and ensures your players are training the right way. With verified skill assessments, AI-driven training, and direct recruiting connections, it levels the playing field for every athlete, no matter where they're from. If you're serious about player development and accountability, why not try Ballogy? Join thousands of teams, coaches, and organizations already using Ballogy to elevate their game. Download the Ballogy app today. Brune, you are a coach yourself.
I was about to
Ballogy
say.
is something you're always looking for information assessments and any way you can get your team right. Sounds like Ballogy could be right up your alley too.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Zone Star State Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Ishmael Johnson. And today we are joined by Isaac Trotter, the national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports and CBS. Isaac, how are you doing today?
Doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we had you on last year, and when we were looking at people to have on again this summer, I was like, let's get Isaac on because last summer he predicted Houston would have the number one team in the country. And, it wasn't exactly right, whatever, Duke could do whatever. But they made the championship game, and that's a pretty good call back in whenever we did this, June or May or whatever it was. So congratulations on that prediction. That was a good one.
Yeah, I feel like I finally got one right there. No, I mean, that's one of those weird things where it's like I could talk myself into basically, hey, I was so right on USAID, but I'm going to conveniently leave out the fact that it took a miracle for them to win in the Final Four, right? Like to get that Final Four win over Duke.
It's all good. Yeah, as a Texas podcast here, I picked Duke to beat them in the Final Four and everything like that. Ish had them losing to Gonzaga in the second round, so I don't know if we want to go down that road.
Listen. Gonzaga put up as much of a fight as basically anybody until Duke, so I will give that myself.
But Isaac, we'll talk about these big Texas schools here, and let's just start with Houston while we're on them, because last year we didn't know much about Milos Uzan, and this year I would say he had a very good year, a productive year, and honestly surpassed my expectations on both sides of the ball. I thought he was going to go to the draft. And obviously, we've seen this slew of players coming back, whether it's Yaxel or whoever else, Uzan, everybody else. First of all, were you surprised that he's coming back? And then two, does this make them your preseason number one, or are you rolling with someone else right now?
I was surprised he came back. I think Houston staff was surprised he came back as well. And so to get him back at this moment really does change the complexion of that team. For me, I do have Houston number one in my preseason rankings, whatever those mean. But I do think that when you factor in getting old guys back, mixing in that really nice retention, and then you mix in some of those 5-star freshmen, and then you mix in just one or two transfers, that's kind of the recipe that teams have used to be awesome. And so Houston, maybe they're not the number one team in the country next year, but how does this team bottom out? I just don't see it. I think that JoJo Tugler is going to go and be the elite defensive player in the Big 12 next year. I think Milos Uzan could win Big 12 Player of the Year. Like that, he is a complete stud, and the level that he leveled up to in the middle of the season and down the stretch was terrific. That float game was on point. He was getting pressure on the rim. He was destroying anybody who went under ball screens against him. That was a complete mistake from a scouting report perspective toward the end of the year. And he was playing at a really, really high level. And you get Emmanuel Sharp back, who I think can be, I think as he continues to improve, he could improve his body as well. And the big thing that I look at Houston, the perimeter size that they've accrued now with Isaiah Harwell kind of joining in, it's like Uzan 6'4", Sharp is 6'3" and built like a fire hydrant. And then you have Harwell in there who's 6'6". That's different than what they've had in the past. So I think this team is ready to rock and roll, and it's going to have a lot of those tenets that we've expected from Kelvin Sampson basketball teams, right? Mixed in with some, hey, we got some NBA guys now, in addition to hey, we're probably going to play harder than almost every single team that we play every night.
No offense to Pop Isaacs, but this was a swing get for us. We were are we sure they're a top 3 team in the country if they don't have Uzan? And then they get Uzan back, and we're like, okay, all right, we're back.
It kind of, because I noticed your colleague Gary Parrish he's kind of has St. John's as like the number one team. It depends on how you feel about how all those transfers are going to mesh. BYU similarly, like they're still, Debanza is going to be great, but it depends on how he melds with the rest of that team. Purdue, a lot of unknowns there. Like as far as number one teams or top five teams with like more guarantees than you would probably, wager for other teams. Houston, to me, it's clearly Houston, right? You look at the rest of the, let's say top 10-ish, 8, like Florida. Okay, sure, maybe they're going to get still transfers to kind of meld in. Tech's probably the other team that's probably more of a guarantee that you would probably say. But as far as like teams, you mentioned it, they're going to play harder than anybody else. Everybody is going to improve who's been there multiple years. And they're bringing in guys who are going to be immediately able to play in that system. Those are guarantees that we've seen over multiple years. So I don't think there's more of a clear number one to me than Houston.
Yeah, and it's hard because I have a ton of respect for Juwan Roberts, and I think they're going to miss him, and they're going to miss some of those the 15-foot elbow face-up game to get to his float game, stuff like that. They're going to miss that. I wasn't the biggest LJ Cryer guy, but they will miss him at times, or it's just he's going to just go create 18 out of nothing, right? Like he just gets you 18 without really running a ton of actions. But I do just think the combination here is just, I like this team. I like what they built. I love that they don't have a ton on Kingston Flemings to come in right away and need you to be a guy, right? Like, could you be our Tahad Pettiford who comes off the bench and we'll just keep it simple for you, come in and just impact winning in simple ways. Like, how does Senek continue to progress? How does Harwell continue to progress? Like, I'm fascinated to see how Kelvin Sampson works with 5 stars because we really haven't seen that much in the past. Sure. But when you can insulate them with 3, no doubt studs and Uzan, Sharp, and Tugler, I think it makes your job way, way easier.
Yeah, we've seen him with 1 before with Jarris Walker and so on and so forth, but 3 of them. And I think, especially again, before Uzan was returning, it was these guys are going to have to actually contribute a lot. Like Flemings without Uzan was going to have to help Isaac's a good amount and so on and so forth, especially with the size and whatnot. But it makes a lot more sense now. That's how I think the best way to phrase it is. All right, let's talk about Texas Tech. Texas Tech, I have written down, I wanted to ask you what your favorite transfer on Texas Tech was, because I think it's easy to talk about top end returning and this team, but I think these transfers are really going to help determine their ceiling. So I guess we can start there. Where do you land with the transfers that Texas Tech has added?
I think Grant McCasland is the best transfer portal scouter in college basketball. I think they absolutely crushed it with this portal haul. For me, it starts with Lawan Watts, the transfer out of Washington State. He is a picture-perfect Darian Williams replacement. If you were building somebody in a lab to replace Darian Williams, it's Lawan Watts. I think those mid-post backdowns that they did with Williams a ton, they're going to use that early and often with him. His playmaking, he could pass with either hand, is really, really smart. If you draw 2 to the ball, he's going to find shooters. You could do some big on big pick and rolls with him and Toppin together if you want to get frisky with that a little bit. Just the addition of a guy like this is really, really fun. Now, he's not a high volume 3-point shooter, but he is a guy you have to guard out on the 3-point stripe. I think he's a career 40% 3-point shooter on lower volume. So that's a little bit different than Williams, but he's a better athlete than Darian. He's a better defensive player than Darian. And I have a ton of respect for Darian. I think Darian's a really good defensive player, but Watts is a little bit more vertically athletic. And I think Watts is a pro. And in this system and in a system and a scheme that they do very, very well with just finding mismatches and just, tapping that button over and over again, I think Watts is going to be a huge, huge piece of this team. And we can get into the rest of the transfer portal class, but this team rocks. And I think Watts is a huge, huge part of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that for me, I like that you mentioned Grant's eye for the portal, because going back to UNT, when he had to kind of play a little bit more money ball, right? It was always, he was going to the JUCO ranks and finding that one guy who could then replace a leading scorer here and there, or fit right into the team. I think with this class last year, they brought in, it was a lot of guys who fit well to make, I think me and Bruni always talked about, on paper, it was here's the point guard with Elijah Hawkins, here's the shooter, here's the star, here's the stretch bit, This year, it looks like he used that mold, but also hey, we need more shooting, because they relied so much on Chance McMillan last year. And when he was out, their reliable shooting was not there. And I think this year he was hey, can you play defense? By the way, can you also shoot 40% upper 30s from 3? are you a little bit more of a swing man to kind of play multiple positions? It feels like he now has that system that he was making last year from what his first year was from last year. And now he's like, okay, now can I upgrade those archetype players that I loved, like Kevin Overton? Can I upgrade maybe on a Kevin Overton? Can I, find a replacement to Darian Williams, like you said, with Watts? And I think now you mentioned it, like he's scouting and identifying the talent, but also like the upgrades to that talent, or like, okay, Kevin Overton wasn't quite what we needed this year. Maybe who's a guy we can get that's maybe a little bit better there.
Yeah, I think you nailed it with Kerwin Welton's a great example of this. Really, really good shooter, but he struggled to guard. Overton, I think, could really guard and then just struggled to shoot at times. Sometimes his offense was a little bit hit or miss. So you weren't really sure which Kevin Overton you were kind of getting. So I think that they were really just trying to find guys that they could trust on both ends a little bit more. And now I think you see the flexibility with this group really start to shine. Luke Bamboy that they've gotten out of VCU, he is an upgrade over Federico. A complete freak show of a rim protector. He just started playing basketball a few years ago. So I think that rapid development is going to improve with him, especially in this staff. I think they can play big with Toppin at the 4, Watts at the 3, and Bamboy at the 5. I think they can play small with Toppin at the 5 and make these lumbering centers get out and guard you in pick and rolls and try to attack them in space. So I love the idea that they have. And the shooting that they've added to Tyree Bryan, if you haven't seen him out of Santa Clara, 6'5", really, really good, strong build athlete, but he can shoot that thing. He really rises over defenders. If you are not you have to be draped on this dude for him not to pull it. He will pull with a hand in his face and elevate. I think Donovan Atwell, a transfer out of UNC Greensboro, sneaky. He's not going to be someone you see on these top 100 type of transfer lists, but 6'5", can handle a little bit, can really shoot it, high volume type of shooter. I think he's going to really help them coming off the bench as well. So you just see the pieces that they've added. And yeah, maybe there's some questions about the ball handling, right? Behind Christian Anderson, how many guys do we really trust with the ball in their hands? That's why I think Watts is such a big addition, because you can use him as that secondary creator a little bit. But Anderson and Toppin combined with all of these guys, it's I just don't know how this offense stinks. They're going to crush you at the rim. They're going to crush you with the mid post. Back downs with Watts. They're going to crush you with those little floaters that Toppin hits that a lot of opposing defenses try to coax, and he just knocks those shots down. And they're going to have shooting all over the place. So, I just don't know how this offense isn't top 10 in college basketball. Now you added a rim protector like Bamboy, where you're going to also be able to sprinkle in some elite defensive things as well. I think Texas Tech is a clear top 10 team for me in the country. And I've thought about them potentially passing up Houston to win the league. I think that's in the range of outcomes.
Woo. I love it.
I was about to say,
they're really good.
I was about to say they came close. I mean, they beat them last year without Toppin and McCaslin on the bench, and then they came really close to beating them again when on the road. So, no, it was the game when half the team was out. Yeah, it was half the team was out. I remember that one.
Changed it, yeah.
So
this is gonna be a fun race in the Big 12, especially like Ish already said with BYU being good and whatnot. We can stay there. I've seen different responses to Baylor's overhaul. It's been interesting because I do think that they needed this. The past couple years have just been kind of stale to a degree, and you've gotten the one big time talent, whether it's Edgecombe or Walter, George, so on, but you haven't really had enough around them to really figure it out. So it felt like this was a stripped down, let's go see what we can do in the portal. Let's go find some new athletes, some new players, some new rim protectors to play some defense, so on and so forth. Are you buying Baylor's overhaul this year?
Yeah, I think change is good. I really do sometimes. And we all talk about retention all the time, but sometimes change is good sometimes as well, right? And I think that there were a lot of guys on that Baylor roster that I personally was just ready for something new. Did I need another year of seeing if Langston Love's going to play tonight? Do I need the update of how close he's coming back? So I think, we don't need to talk about all of the guys that have dipped, but I just think that the pieces that they've added, they will miss Rob Wright. And I'm not saying they won't. They will definitely miss him. But I think that the additions of the size on the wing has really changed the complexion of the defense that I think they can play. I think they're way more switchable on the wing. Daniel Skillings is 6'6". Ratai is 6'9". Michael Ratai, who's at the 4, who I really like. Cam Carr is a sneaky addition that a lot of people still haven't really talked about because it was a weird transfer ad in the middle of the season. 6'5", can really, really guard. They've added 2 of my favorite mid-major transfers in Ratai from Oregon State and Obi Agbeam from Wyoming. Agbeam can ball, man. Like he just walks on the floor just knowing how to score. And I think they've insulated him really smartly with big wings and real rim protection. I think this is be a drop coverage heavy team, right? Like you're going to have, a guy like Justin Bodo in the back line. I think teams just shot 51% at the rim against High Point when he was on the floor. He's a elite level rim protector. I think change is good. And I don't think Baylor is going to be some team that's like top 15 nationally, but I think this is a tournament team. And I just think that they're going to be able to find a little bit more answers to the test. And sometimes you just need to overhaul your roster a little bit. And if Yesufu, is that how I say it? Like if he pops, that's Baylor's upside to being like a top 5 team in the league.
Yeah, I think we were talking with Matt Wilson, who hosts the Between Two Bears podcast, and it felt like to me that Scott Drew was kind of trying to patch together another national title type team, right? Where it was like, oh, here, like similarly to that title team, where it was like, oh, they have Jared Butler, who's kind of the guy. They bring in a transfer who hits in Mitchell, obviously hit after a couple of years. And then a bunch of guys who just work really well together and they play a certain style. It seemed like he was always going for that, where it was like, oh, Keontae, if we just build the team around Keontae George, if we just build the team around last year, Edgecombe and Jeremy Roach could be the guys. And like, we can be a little undersized because we're just so athletic. And that was such a perfect storm of a team that like, it's hard to just recreate that. And I think he came close the year after with James Akinjo, where it was like that year with LJ Cryer and Akinjo, and it was like, oh, that team, that team. And then healthy John Chachua, where it was like, oh, I can maybe do this again. And like there are a couple of years of like trying to get there. And last year, it was probably the worst case of it, where it was like Jeremy Roach, not really a point guard. Rob Wright kind of towards the end of the year, he was obviously proved to be pretty good at it, but it was like he's kind of thrusted into the starting point guard now. Edgecombe had to be a 15-point per game scorer from the get-go, and it was like, all right. And then they had no centers basically, like at all. I don't know how many times I got tired of watching Josh Ozumuna and those guys try to, and then who's the big I'm forgetting?
Norshad Omier.
Norshad Omier, like he's a good player, but it was like, man, it's not the guys you need on like a national title team or contending team. And finally, Scott Drew just said, you know what? Rob Wright's gone. This is a chance to just like completely wipe the slate clean. And like you said, I think it's been a lot of smart additions. I'm very optimistic. Like you said, I think it's a tournament team. I do think that we're a couple years away from them being back to that team that you can expect to be playing, close to April. But I think the past couple of years, you saw a team that had a very hard ceiling, where it was like maybe the second weekend, and that is it. And they weren't competing with Houston, which I think was a big marker for a lot of people. It was like you saw Houston continuously pass them up and outplay them. And you see LJ Cryer dropping 20 in Waco, where it was like, you have to switch something up. So I'm very optimistic about this team. I do think we have reasonable expectations for them, but this is going to be a much better and enjoyable, in my opinion, team to watch than the past couple of years.
I think the hype would have been a lot higher if Rob was still on this team next to Obi, and you start feeling like, oh, like this team could really go. But yeah, I agree with you. I think they're a little bit more high floor than some of the newcomer heavy teams that we've seen in the past, where it's like, okay, one night they could look great, one night they could look horrible. I just like the mix with this team. I think the mix is going to be good enough to be rock solid, consistent on a night to night basis, even because they're old. 2, I think that they have a higher defensive floor. And like you said, last year's team, I felt like they had a lot of guys that like the positional overlap was pretty obvious. And then the lack of positional size, not just at the perimeter, but in the front court, your wings were okay size, but not like huge. You didn't have like those 6'8" wing out there. So I think this team just makes a little bit more sense and has pieces that might coalesce into something a little bit better, even if the raw talent isn't necessarily as high. Like, I don't know if they have necessarily like that dude who's going to be a guaranteed top 5 pick next year.
Sure.
Yeah. We'll jump to SMU here, a team that surpassed our expectations in their first year in the ACC. I think surpassed even their expectations in the ACC. To be fair, the ACC wasn't great last year, but still, to have the year they had, to hit on the transfers that I think they hit on in Andy Enfield's first year was exciting. They returned Boopy Miller, which was significant to me. I wasn't sure if that was going to end up happening. They added Jaron Pierre from Jacksonville State, who is an elite scorer. What do you make of this team? I looked at your story on the ACC, and you have them in that first of that tier 3, which is what, fifth or sixth in the ACC. Do you think that's kind of the mark for them this year?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the range I like them in. I think they could easily be a team that jumps into tier 2 if they, like, when I had tier 2 as like a top 25 type of caliber team. I think that, like, I don't think they're quite there, but I think they could be somewhat in that conversation with the right clicks. I did this study about like how many high major teams got back 2 guys that scored double figures last year. SMU is one of 17 high major teams out of 76 that got 2 double-figure high major scores back with Sana Igatoglu and obviously Boopy Miller. And BJ Edwards was not far away either, right? Yeah. He was like 9.5 points a game last year. So, like, that type of retention is smart. Now, I have a few questions about the build. Like, Pierre wants to come on the floor and be a dog. Like, he wants to be the number 1 dude on the floor. I think Boopy at times feels like he's the best player on the floor, like Corey Washington at times, but like he was the best player on the floor at Wichita State. So I'm just curious how it kind of meshes. But I think there are going to be nights where SMU's backcourt just balls out, because Edwards is a really, really nice complementary piece. Boopy can go get one, and Pierre, like, if you haven't watched Pierre, go back and watch his highlights from the Mizzou game. No one could stay in front of him, and he's attacking the rim with bad intentions. So 6'5", 3-level scorer, can really make shots off the bounce. Like, has everything in his bag. So I think they're a good team. We'll see if they can become a great team.
I think for me, a lot of this hinges on, not a lot of it, I won't say that, but they have a lot of intriguing players. Like, if I'm going to be honest, I don't think Brune, I don't think we've talked about, like, I like the addition, or I'm intrigued by the addition of Sam Walters a lot, because I liked him coming out of high school. Obviously with Michigan, it was hard to crack. They had such a good thing going with Vlad and Wolf. But, like, if he could find any offense in the paint, I think there'd be like something interesting there. He's such a stretch big, like almost like a Channing Frye stretch big, where it's like he's not touching the paint at all, unless like on a fast break. But like, I loved a lot of his. I went back and watched some of his high school tape, and I was like, man, there's something here. He's athletic. He can finish around the rim. I don't know if it was the Big Ten physicality or what, but like, if Andy Enfield can tap into something, whether it's his offense, and maybe he does just like hit this resurgence as a stretch big and fits really well. Because one of our favorite players, they were never going to replace Matt Cross, but like, if they could find a big who can just do a little bit of versatility on offense, again, he doesn't have the ball handling or the playmaking, but if he could just do a little bit of the inside out game that Matt Cross provided, I think that there's something really there to set this team to another level. Because the ACC, like you mentioned, wasn't very good last year. They kind of are reloading. I'm also curious, Isaac, on this one, where it's like NC State, right? Like, that's going to be a new player in the ACC under Will Wade. Like, the ACC is kind of like in this flux to where SMU could either enter into that top 5, top 3, or they could kind of fall back to the middle, lower half.
Totally. No, because like, I think Virginia is going to be much improved with Ryan Odom now there, and they got real money to spend. I think you're starting to see Miami put a roster together that's not going to be 7-27 or whatever they were last year under a new coach. And then obviously, like you said, NC State as well too. So yeah, I think SMU is part of like this big middle of the pack where it's like, you can really talk yourself into finishing as high as like 3rd in the league. Like, could that happen if Pierre's like an all ACC guy? Like you said, Walters, I think Walters is probably, like, I just think he's more of a bit player. Like, he's like, there's a good chance 85% of his shots next year are threes. Like, that just is what it is. Like, but I think he can help this team.
I was looking up his scouting. I was looking at his Michigan team. I was like, did he just take threes last year? I'm like, you're 6'11". Please step in the paint. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he got hurt too at Michigan, so that also impacted things a little bit as well. But I mean, I think they need that. Like, and losing Cross, like you said, is a great call, because I thought Cross was their best player last year. Well, like, I thought he was their best player. Like, I know he didn't lead them in scoring, but just the total impact is awesome. Huge. But yeah, I think Samet can take another jump as well too. It's just like a a really high floor, all like you just know he's going to be one of the better big men in the league. You just know he's just really, really solid on both ends. And I think maybe a little bit of addition by subtraction with Johan Traore dipping. I think you can play a few more like traditional-ish lineups with Walters at the 4 and Yugotoglu at the 5, and you're not trying to like, are we really going to try 3 bigs at sometimes or 2 bigs all the time? And they have some high upside guys too. Like I like Toombs, the freshman coming in top 40 type of recruit. I think he's going to be ready to roll early. So I think he'll help them as well too.
Yeah, that's the only other thing I was going to add was I think these freshmen are going to have to play. Like if this team is going to reach its ceiling of making the NCAA tournament, these freshmen I think are going to have to contribute on a fairly regular basis, especially Toombs, and we'll see about Jermaine O'Neal Jr. and so on. I'm just going to group Texas and A&M together here because the 2 SEC teams and 2 new coaches, we don't have to go in depth of their roster. I'm just going to ask which one you have more faith in year one under new coaches, A&M or Texas?
Texas. I think Texas is going to be a little bit more solid. I think A&M's highs are going to be high when they shoot a ton of threes and the threes go in. I think the lows are going to be low when they shoot a ton of threes and they don't go in. Like that's kind of how I feel about A&M. Texas, I feel like a little bit more solid. I think you have more two-way guys. Tremone Mark is a guy that I think can continue to get better as a two-way type of player. I love Dalen Swain as a potential like NBA draft sleeper if he can finally get things to pop. Like he's a really, really nice defensive player that I think is going to pop. Matas Fokaitis out of FAU. He's huge. He had some insane on-off splits last year. He moves dudes out of the paint. Like I think he's going to be a really good player. They really like Lucina Traore as well, who missed all of last year at Xavier, but another transfer that they think could be a helpful piece. And they just have a lot of like vets. Like Jordan Pope is a vet, been around the block a few times. Mark is a vet, been around the block for a while. Kendall Weaver. I love watching Kendall Weaver play. I feel like Texas has a really, really high floor, and they could definitely make the tournament. A&M feels more like if they're going to have nights where they look pretty good, and then they're going to have nights where they look atrocious, and they could probably beat anybody in the league and probably also lose to anybody in the league because I think their interior defense is going to stink. I think their rebounding is going to be a problem. And I don't know if I totally trust a Pop Isaacs, Mackenzie Mcbacco, Rylan Griffin type of team.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Pop Isaacs on this show, and at the same time when we hated his transfer to Houston, we were like, I don't know how that's going to work. We were also, when he announced that he was going to A&M, we were like, it's like the kombucha meme. We're like, maybe, I don't know. Like it's like I kind of like it. It's a lot better than Houston, I think, where his fit. But like that's also like the gif of the guy putting the fries in the oil, where you're just waiting for it to like potentially blow up in your face.
Dude, it was so weird because like when he committed to Houston, there was a bunch of coaches I was talking to that were like, God, this is going to work, right? This is going to be the staff that gets him the most out of him. And like, he's going to be like LJ Cryer 2.0.
Yeah.
And then he dips
it. It felt like Kelvin Sampson taking like a logo 3. He's like, you know what? Let me just see what I got.
Then he dips to A&M. And I have coaches being like, so is he going to lead the SEC in the scoring next year? I think he might. Like he might. Now it won't be efficient, but like that boy's going to take it. Like he's going to get his clips up. Like the clip will be unloaded at Texas A&M.
Yeah, it's been a long time stuff had like a polarizing, like everybody knows what Pop Isaacs is, but like everybody also is like convinced that like I can be the one to fix it. And I wish he would have stayed healthy at Creighton because like I wanted to see how that team worked with him in it because he started so well. But I'm also like, I just don't know if you can play with a guy who just doesn't defend like that and doesn't shoot very efficiently for a full game or full season. So I don't know. I'm very intrigued by it. Brune, I don't know. I wanted to ask him a little bit about the head coaching searches. I don't know if you had any.
The only other thing I was going to say on A&M was and it's only his first year, but this is the ultimate test of Bucky Ball right out the rip, going to SEC. I honestly don't know much about Jakari Lane. If you can fill us in on Jakari Lane, I haven't been able to watch his stuff or anything like that.
Small, undersized guard that can really shoot it. He played in the same league, I believe, or no, he was at North Alabama, so I don't think they were in the same league, but he had a game against Samford where he just balled, and I think that left a big impression on Bucky. But yeah, high volume 3-point shooter. I think he shot over 40% from downtown. He's a little bit like Pop though, where it's like he'll shoot 40% from downtown and 42% from the field, which is it shows you kind of like what type of volume he is. But he's going to be a guy that I think they expect to come in and make shots. But I have some of the same questions about the perimeter defense as well. He can play make a little bit as well, get 2 feet in the paint, find open shooters. But yeah, I'm just concerned about the point of attack defense with Pop Isaacs and Jakari Lane if they're on the floor together. Yeah. For me, I think Marcus Hill is going to have to be a guy that plays a lot more. The transfer out of NC State, he's like a real rim pressure type of guard, and he's a little bit bigger. So I think that's the type of player that I think could potentially end up stealing Jakari Lane's starting spot if that's the path they go down.
Yeah, at the very least, it's going to be just all the way opposite of Buzz Williams last year, and so
jumpers will be made.
Jumpers
will be made.
They will make shots and not seemingly try to miss shots to go get the rebound.
I was about to just throw it off the backboard and just get a rebound. I wanted to ask about both head coaching searches with Texas and A&M, because Texas, obviously, Del Conte seemed like he had his guy from the get-go, probably had his guy a couple years ago until Rodney Terry made the run. A&M obviously struck out on a couple guys. At least for me, on face value, kind of an underwhelming hire. It felt like, we need to hire somebody. As it's gone on, as he's recruited as well, like I've grown into being more optimistic on it. Just what are your thoughts in general on Texas? For me, it felt like Texas needed a stabilizer, right? Somebody who just gives you what you know, or somebody who can deliver what you a competitive team and a team that plays a certain way and can get you competitive again. And then for me, A&M, now I kind of see them as like a really high potential ceiling under Bucky, but at the time it just seemed like there was no idea of like, this is the style we want to play. It was like, let's get McCaslin, let's get, Chris Beard, let's get, the guy that has a ton of possessions and puts up a shot. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on both moves?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think let's start with A&M. Like, I'm surprised the roster looks this competent, to be honest. Like, I thought it was going to look dire because he got the job so late in the cycle. But I think with Bucky, you're like, all right, is he our Nate Oates type of archetype of like we're getting an offensive mastermind who might be ahead of his craft a little bit? But I don't know. Like, I feel like more of the richer teams in college basketball are smarter than ever now, and like are using better processes than ever, and are really dialed in on the analytics. So it's like, how much does that like you're not going to help math people anymore. I don't think so. We'll see what Bucky does. Like Texas, on the other hand, I think Sean Miller is pound for pound as good of a coach as you'll find in college basketball. Personally, I think his X's and O's are really smart. I think he does really good things defensively. Last year at Xavier, like they would do really cool stuff where they would dork defensive teams. They'd use their centers on non-shooters. Like they will try a little bit of everything. I think he's really smart in that end. I think he's been a really good portal evaluator mixed in. Like I remember like some of it, he would always take the best CUSA transfers at Xavier year after year and get like the most out of them. Yeah. And so I think he's done a good job. Shout out Sule Boom, best shot fake. And then that's Sir Jabari Rice. Never mind. And then he also mixes in like the ability to recruit at a really high level at Arizona. So it's like I think he checks off every box that I'd want from like the recruiting, from the X's and O's, from the program building. And Texas is going to have resources. I think he's got a chance to win a title there. And I think that is the differentiator between Texas hiring Sean and Texas A&M hiring Bucky, because it feels like a lot would need to go right for A&M to be like a legit Final Four team. I don't think Texas is that far away from being like a true, like awesome basketball program under Sean Miller.
There you go. Anything else, Ish?
No, that was all I had. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll go out as Texas as a national title contender. We're just going to clip that right there. That's all we're going to do. But no, Isaac, we appreciate it, man. Thank you for coming on. Obviously, always great talking to you over the summer. And, we'll keep in touch throughout the year.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.